I always say that our clientele kind of breaks down into three verticals. The first being startups. The startup community in the Middle East has obviously boomed in the last 6 years that I've been here. So naturally a lot of our business lands within that. Next to that, we have global enterprises and organisations that have an offering here. So if you look at people like the Big Four consultancies, for example, obviously big global businesses that have operations here and across the Middle East. And then the third is more of the local businesses, so your family groups, your Majid Al Fatahs of the world, those sort of players. So it kind of sits in those three buckets. I'd say right now, purely based on the market, probably at least 50% of our business is in that startup world, just because that's where so much of the demand comes from. A huge amount of evolution. I've been here, it'll be 6 years in February. And I'd say 6 years ago when I came here, startups was 15 to 20% of the amount of work that we did, and it's now 50. So there's been periods where it's fluxed, but at the moment, the amount of investment going into the startup world is huge. I think also we've seen focus points over that time. So there was a period where a lot of funding was going into e-commerce and related industries. So there were huge funding rounds for people like Noon. Amazon entered the marketplace in, I think, 2017, 2018. You had big investments in companies like Property Finder. Then there was a period of big investment going into the food delivery companies and related. And now, in the last 12 months, we're seeing fintech and health tech. Massive investment into these places. So, the growth of the startup scene has been huge. We do a lot of work with one of the major venture capital firms out here. And the conversations that I have with them are that we're really just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Over the next 10 years, it's just going to boom like crazy, which is great. Yeah, a lot of it depends on the stage that startups at. So, our really early founders are looking, early stage founders who have got 10 to 15 people working for them, they're looking for their early stage C-suite, right? So they might be looking for a CTO, a chief product officer, head of marketing, and then they filter down the roles beneath that once they start securing further funding rounds. If we look across the breadth of our business, the highest amount of demand is across the software engineering function, which I'd encompass things like DevOps, site reliability, and everything across software engineering and QA. There's always a significant demand for strong data professionals. I'd say that's a little more constant at the moment, whereas the software engineering and DevOps piece is hitting a real growth curve. And then on the other side, in our sort of digital piece, there's a lot of demand across performance marketing, in particular around growth and growth hacking, which I think is something that up until the last year was a bit of a buzzword that people didn't really understand. But now they're getting to grips with that and the harmonisation of the digital marketing function, the technology function of a business, and how they can actually work better together. Yeah, the obvious answer to this is Saudi Arabia, right? Now, I think Vision 2030, the amount of investment that's going into the giga projects in Saudi is naturally going to trickle down to service providers like us. We've invested in an office in Saudi, so we're physically on the ground in Riyadh. I'm there in 2 weeks. There's no doubt that Saudi is going to be the fastest growth market in the GCC. We're very well equipped to take advantage of that. One of the problems that I've seen in the past is without being on the ground and actually understanding the locality, it's very, very hard to deliver a good service. So there's no doubt that Saudi will be huge for us. But don't overlook some of the other GCC locations, because when I have these conversations with people, there's a very razor-sharp focus on Saudi. For me, Bahrain's very interesting. The Central Bank of Bahrain in particular are hugely investing in the fintech startup scene. And they're licensing a lot of the fintechs that are then operating across the UAE and Saudi. So that's hugely interesting. Obviously the restrictions with Qatar have now been dropped. Qatar 7 or 8 years ago was a huge market, so I think that's going to come back to us. And I've spent quite a bit of time in Kuwait, and offers a different prospect, but I think it's really interesting. So it's not just purely UAE and KSA for us, it's across the whole GCC if you're focusing purely on the Middle East.